10th episode of CA Talk, a webcast series focused on the topics of compliance, risk management, and governance. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce our first international guest, Mr. Pekka Dare. Hello, Pekka.
Hi, how you doing, Jan?
I'm doing good. Thanks for joining us today. Pekka is a Director of Stakeholder Engagement and Delivery Excellence at the International Compliance Association. While I assume that most of you already know the ICA, which is one of the biggest educational organizations in the fields of financial crime prevention, compliance, GRC, and other topics in the world, Pekka, maybe could I ask you to briefly describe sort of what your mission is and what your main goals and values are?
Sure, thanks, Jan. I will. So yeah, thanks for having me, and welcome to you all. So if I share my screen with you really quickly, I can just talk to a slide that I've got that explains a little bit about what the International Compliance Association is all about. Basically, this sort of represents the three pillars of what the ICA does. So we are a professional body. We work all around the world. We have our head offices in the UK, but we have regional offices in Singapore, Dubai, and New York. And we're all about promoting professional standards in compliance. So the first thing to say is we have a professional membership community all around the world of professional membership, where we're trying to share information about compliance and get people like yourselves who work in compliance to build new connections. And that's why really delighted to be working with Jan and the Compliance Academy. So there are thousands of compliance professionals all around the world, and we have a membership portal where we share information on topics around financial crime, sanctions, compliance, and we also put people in touch with each other and run lots of free events as well all over the world. The second thing we do is about knowledge. So we award professional qualifications and training in compliance and financial crime. And we work with one of the world's leading business universities, which is the University of Manchester Business School. And we award professional qualifications from entry level right up to diploma and master's level qualifications. And we do those on a range of different topics. And then finally, we're about recognition. So we have a not-for-profit arm, and we're very much about raising standards. So we work with a lot of international bodies like the regional FATF style bodies. We work with law enforcement and regulators, and we work with industry bodies to try and give compliance professionals a mark of credibility so that you can enhance your career and you can demonstrate that you're committed to raising standards to fight things like corruption and money laundering and raise standards around compliance in general. So yeah, delighted to be talking to you today. And just, I'll share you this slide before I stop sharing for a minute. This is just an example of some of the different levels of qualifications we have, right from sort of people that are brand new to industry. So whether you're in compliance in a financial services firm or a manufacturing company or oil and gas or technology, we have an entry level program, and then we take you right through maybe if you're in a more junior role, right up to a senior manager, and ultimately industry leaders we train as well, all around the world. So yeah, that's a little bit about the ICA. We've trained, I think now it's over 150,000 compliance professionals around the world. So it's really huge, and yeah, just delighted to be speaking to you in the Czech Republic today.
Yeah, I mean, we have officially started our activities last year, and this year we were fortunate enough to partner with the ICA. I'm glad that you're showing this diversification of the different courses, because we actually have a competition going on right now. For those of you who are watching us regularly, we have started a competition for 2 of ICA's international diplomas, where basically all you need to do is find a colleague of yours who you probably consider to be a professional, either in compliance or financial crime prevention, and then explain to us why you think such a person would be suitable for nomination to receiving this diploma course attendance stipend. I think the courses in play are the diploma courses, if I'm not mistaken. Pekka, could you maybe tell us, who do you think, as far as professional level, these courses are sort of best for, or who is the ideal candidate for?
Yeah, sure. So the diploma standards, once you do the diploma, Jan, you are marked out as a subject matter expert, and it's like a gold standard qualification, and it's recognized all around the world. You can use the designation MICA, so member of the ICA, and it's for people that have had some experience of working in the industry, but have got real potential to go on and become senior leaders, and they want to really take their knowledge to the next level. So they might have worked in a role in compliance for a little while, but they really want to mark themselves out as an expert. And that could be an expert in anti-money laundering or anti-bribery, anti-financial crime, sanctions, anything like that, or it could be a more broader compliance expertise that they want. So I would say, Jan, it's probably someone with some experience of working in a compliance type background, but maybe wants to take their career to the next level and get a really, really sought after, gold standard recognized qualification in compliance. Yeah, so it's a great opportunity. It sounds a really good idea. So yeah, I mean, again, I'm sure Jan can point you to more information about what's the content of the diplomas, what's involved in the study. But honestly, having taught those diplomas myself for many years now, the students really enjoy them, and they come out of it much, it deepens their knowledge, And I think I was saying to you, Jan, before the start of the call, that I've trained people and they've started out reasonably junior. They've done qualifications with us, and they've gone through their careers, and they've gone on to become like global heads of compliance in their organizations, so it definitely will help you in your career.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely encourage everybody to take part. As you described, I also believe it's a great opportunity to raise or sort of bring your professional level to new heights. I guess the natural question is sort of stemming from this is, you guys, as you have said, have educated over 150,000 not only compliance, but financial crime prevention practitioners. Have you noticed any significant trends in the last few years with respect to, is the demand for these issues ever growing in terms of education? And
yeah, massively, yeah, massively. So I would say the standard has really risen in the last sort of 5 years, especially in the, mainly in the AML space. And we also train a lot of people in the first line of organizations. So like, operational staff, relationship managers, salespeople, because they need to understand like ethics, particularly things like customer due diligence, sanctions risk, all of these topics. And as well, I don't know if we've got any regulators watching this, but like regulator standards are rising as well. And of course, regulators all around the EU and all around the world talk to each other. So when the regulators come to your firms, they are asking more challenging questions about, how do you really do meaningful compliance? So that could be, how do you, for example, really know your customers? How do you really understand the nature of their business? Do you understand their supply chains? Do you understand who they deal with? Do you understand their sanctions risk? Do you understand what the news media and the negative news media says about them? And crucially, can you document that? Can you prove it? So can you explain how you got comfortable with the risks of your client? And that change of having to like actually think about, well, how do I justify that we got comfortable with the risk of our client so that in 4 years' time, a regulator could look at that and say, we understand why you made the decision to enter into a relationship with that customer. And of course, these global financial crime and money laundering scandals we've seen, that's also driving a lot of pressure, especially on regulated firms to do more. And then, of course, on top of that, you've had all the massive increase in complexity around compliance, like sanctions has got really complicated now. And even like regulators now, they're really focusing on compliance with like ethics and conduct of business type compliance, how you treat your customers fairly and how you make ethical decisions as a firm and what your culture's like. So I guess the role of compliance has become so broad now. You've got culture, you've got ethics, you've got financial crime, you've got sanctions, you've got anti-money laundering, and it's become now so many different specialisms in compliance that there are so many career options. And that's what is exciting about, working with compliance professionals now. We see that people in compliance have so many career opportunities to decide where they want to take their career. Do they want to focus more on sanctions, or do they want to focus more on conduct-based or governance and risk and compliance? There are a lot of options now, but definitely the standards, it used to be all about compliance, ticking the box. Yeah. I've complied with this regulation. It's not about that anymore. It's about actually thinking critically and asking questions about your customers and your counterparties and being able to show that you're doing the right thing. So yeah, it's been an exciting few years, but a lot of work.
Yeah, I would assume so. I think two things that you mentioned were quite interesting. One is the sort of ethical conduct aspect of doing business, because that's something we were trying to focus on lately as well. We started a project called An Ethical Company, where we would like to develop, or we have already developed, a certain benchmark for companies where they can get sort of tested and find out, on what level their corporate culture might be. Mm-hmm. And for me, the interesting aspect is, and I wonder if that's something you've been noticing as well, or not, but to us it seems, like doing business ethically should almost be considered as a part of the social responsibility of a company, Yeah. Because we generally see the topics like diversity and environment protection included in this agenda. But it seems like doing the business itself and doing it the way you should be doing it has not been accented as much as it should be.
No, definitely. And, I'm here in the UK, but I train a lot with regulators in like the Asia Pacific region, like in Singapore. Like you've got the Monetary Authority of Singapore. In the UK, you've got the Financial Conduct Authority. And, in the US, you've got so many regulators, but they are all pushing this agenda of like ethics and culture. So now when they come into your firm, they're asking you, how do you make sure that your business makes the right decisions that are for example, things like conflicts of interest, how you manage conflicts of interest between maybe customers and clients, how you manage things like whistleblowing, and how you like make the right decision. So it's not just about money. So everything now about how you pay your staff, do you just reward people purely on how much they sell? Because if you do that, then you will get bad compliance and you will get people doing the wrong thing. So, how you actually make decisions as a business is definitely being scrutinized. And what regulators now are asking is, okay, how do you make sure people are making ethical decisions and they're not taking advantage of customers or counterparties? And how do you hardwire that down your organization? So how do you build it into like decision-making committees, for example? So a lot of firms I work with, they have ethical codes now, or they'll have decision-making filters. So like in like client onboarding or client exiting committees, I know one big international bank, they call it the YES test. And they basically have 5 questions they will ask around any key business decision. So things like, would I feel comfortable explaining this to my elderly grandparents, this decision, or would I be happy explaining this to a regulator in 5 years' time? And these are this is a real change, isn't it, for compliance, because it's not just about following a rule. It's actually saying, well, rules are great, but our final test should be, is this the right thing to do for both for our business and for society? And you know what? If it's the right thing to do for your business and society, it's probably good business and you'll probably make more money out of it. And if it's not the right thing to do for society, you probably won't make more money out of it in the long run anyway. So it's not about saying no to business. It's about building the right sort of business, you know, and winning. That's the big challenge that I find now, Jan, with people in compliance, and not even compliance. It's how they convince the business that compliance makes good commercial sense, you know, and it's the right thing to do. And actually, we don't want to do business with the wrong sort of people, because we might make some short-term money, but in the long term, it will cost us more money, and probably could harm us in lots of other ways too, you know.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
yeah, we do a lot on culture and how to actually change it in an organization. But yeah, very important. Yeah.
It seems like one of the biggest components of a compliance officer's role then is to be a very good communicator. Yeah. Have you, I'm sort of wondering, how have you maybe tried to reflect that in the courses themselves? You know, do you try to develop those communication skills?
Yeah.
Or
definitely. We've had a lot of demand for this now. Our biggest, we talk to our members all around the world, and they tell us really loudly, we want more about how to like win the hearts and minds of our business, how to communicate with them properly, how to like engage them. I don't know about you, Jan, in your career, but I know a lot of compliance people, they've tended to sort of say to the business, you need to do this because it's the law or it's the regulation. And if you don't, you'll get a fine or you'll get a penalty. And actually that might be true, but that doesn't really get people in the business engaged. They need to know why it's the right thing to do and why it makes commercial sense as well. So it's kind of thinking how you can work with the business. So we do a lot on our diploma level course, especially about how to make compliance into a competitive advantage. So for example, if you're doing compliance properly in the first line of your business, it means you're hopefully getting things right first time, and you're not having to remediate things and go back to customers and ask for more information. And you're not going to get fines, and you're not going to, get restrictions as well. So, but also you're going to make more profitable business relationships. So yeah, and also the whole concept of the risk-based approach is about, focusing your resources where you have the most risk. So if you do that really well, you can save a lot of money, because, you shouldn't be wasting all your effort with, customers that are sort of normal risk. You should be focusing on the higher risk customers. And that's where you should really, focus your efforts. So yeah, definitely soft skills, influencing skills, communication skills, listening skills. The best compliance officers I see, they go out and they understand the business. And if you're not doing that, you're not doing your job. You should be sitting with the business and understand what their pressures are and what they do. That's what makes a really good compliance officer, I think.
Yeah, I hope a lot of the Czech compliance officers are listening to you right now, or will take this to heart, hopefully. You mentioned customer due diligence. I wonder, have there been any sort of significant impacts of COVID-19 or?
Yeah, sure. Well, let me show you a couple of slides I've got. I think I'm still sharing my slides with you, aren't I? So yeah. If I, what I'll do is I'll start with, if I move us on to, I'll come back to the criminal. So I know you might have a question for me around how criminals have changed with COVID, but what I would say is, I'm guessing, your members here and you're the people watching this, we probably have some bigger firms, we probably have some smaller firms, we have lots of different sectors, and it's been a real mix. And I would say generally the bigger firms that I've spoken to, they've coped really well with operational challenges around CDD. And also I think traditional banks have found it harder than like fintech companies. So like I was training a big international financial technology payments company last week, and they never dealt in bits of paper before COVID, and they never saw their customers face to face anyway. So for them, actually, COVID didn't pose that many problems. But if you're from a business that relies on seeing customers face to face, taking documents and bits of paper, then that's done for most firms has really accelerated digitization around CDD. So digitally identifying clients, using vendor software solutions to help with that, to take all the paper out of it altogether and take out that need to physically interact. And, the number of, I'm sure it's the same in the Czech Republic, but the number of fintech firms available now offering solutions around, everyone from verifying you using, a facial recognition to electronic identity verification tools is gone massive, isn't it? And what I would say, one thing I've noticed is there's been a lot of electronic workarounds put in on that last bullet point there for lack of a wet signature. So lots of firms have kind of accepted that they can, they won't get a wet signature, and they've put in workarounds for that. And I'll give you an example. Like I train a lot of people involved in private banking. Mm-hmm. With private banking, you're obviously talking about wealthy customers, and they usually like a lot of face-to-face interaction, and that's been quite a difficult area. The Czech Republic's quite a sophisticated jurisdiction, but I also train in some more developing countries where, like in the Middle East and they found it, and like North and East Africa, and they found it really challenging because the technology infrastructure is not there to support them with this. One thing I would say is that a lot of firms have been noticing that they've got a lot more poor quality suspicious activity reports. So there might be something strange with a customer's, transactions or due diligence, but quite often in COVID, it's harder to get hold of people. So they just ended up reporting an STR or an SAR to their local FIU. And forgive me, I don't know the name of the Czech FIU, but I wonder what it'll be interesting to hear from the Czech FIU as to what they've seen a change. But yeah, what I would say as well, regulators, they have also said, we know things may have to change in your firm. Again, I can't speak for the Czech regulator, but this is an example, from all around the world, I've seen this, where regulators generally have been pretty flexible, and they said, look, if you need to have a waiver or a workaround to how you onboard clients or how you do CDD because of COVID, that's probably okay, but we want you to keep a record of any waivers that you're doing, and we want an end date to that waiver, and we want a plan to get back to business as usual at some point. So you can see on the screen there, the UK regulator has said, look, you can change your AML controls and CDD. For example, in the UK, that we've said if customers' driving licenses expire, it's okay now because most people haven't been able to go in and renew them. But what regulators are saying, if you're going to do change your compliance around COVID, you should probably do it on a risk-based approach. You should definitely think, what are the new risk assessment or red flags for clients that might be different in COVID to normal? Yeah. So what you might have argued was high risk before COVID might be different now. Yeah. And also, if you are going to do relaxations on your CDD, you should have a register. Who authorized it, for how long, because regulators probably are going to want to see that. And again, just finally on this, I think most firms I'm talking to have been really happy with how the regulators are being flexible. So I'm hoping that's the same in the Czech Republic, but they are nervous that whenever they do a waiver or change or relaxation, about when they'll be asked to go back and remediate, how much work that'll be. And they're nervous about that. So that may be an issue for some of your members,
I think as far as the Czech FIU goes, we actually have had the Czech FIU director on one of our previous episodes. So we talked a bit about the latest developments, and from their standpoint, I think the main topic definitely was adoption of new technologies and tools. Yeah. But then from the side of respective organizations, I, for example, have noticed, I think it's 2 weeks ago, where they finally launched an electronic form of the SAR. Yeah. So whenever you're filing a report, you can do it electronically now, which I would assume helps tremendously.
That massively helps. And I mean, we've had that for a few years now in the UK, but it'll help. but the UK's report from their FIU just came out about a week ago, and the numbers have gone up massively, but the quality is still an issue, you know. And obviously once it's electronic, that makes things slicker. You can use have a glossary with keywords, so you can search for keywords like terrorism or whatever it is, you know. So yeah, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. Should I just quickly talk about the criminal risk and just be interested to see whether this is consistent with what your FIU said? So just quickly, I won't spend long on this, but I guess most of your members will be aware of the FATF report that came out in, I think it was May. And it basically said criminals are targeting CDD measures in COVID, trying to get around the CDD. And we know this is true. You know, we know that they use fake document websites. We know that they use fake image generators of human faces. I don't know if you've seen that website, thispersondoesnotexist.com. Have you seen that?
I don't think I have.
Oh, it's amazing. So I'll just quickly show you. Look, I've got to show you this website. So let me just show you my. So hopefully, if I share my screen, quickly do it. Where is it? Screen. Here we go. Share. Okay, so. Oh, okay. Right, hang on a sec. There we go. Right, just bear with me. Okay, so yeah, all your viewers need to do, all your members need to do, and you should try this too, Jan. Just type in the URL, thispersondoesnotexist.com, and it'll take you straight there. And what it does, it's an algorithm by, I don't know if you've heard of NVIDIA, the graphics card company, and it just randomly generates a human face. Now, this is not a real person. Sometimes the algorithm gets slightly wrong, there's a little glitch in the picture, but I would challenge you to detect that usually this person is not a real person. Where there are also websites out there where you can buy fake bank accounts, bank statements, fake personal details. Some of them are free. So, you know, it's so easy now to generate, you know, would you look at that and say that's not a real person? I don't know, it looks pretty convincing to me.
Yeah, yeah, I would.
So things are moving really quickly in this, and I think we all just need to be aware. And actually coming back to the point, one of the changes I've seen in CDD is a move away from focusing on ID and V, so identifying and verifying customers. Now it's more about, you know, not taking documents off them, but actually stepping back and looking at the whole relationship and saying, you know, is this whole relationship plausible based on what I know about the customer? Does it make sense? You know, because it's so easy now, isn't it, to fake documents, to fake even photos, you know? So, yeah, anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you.
No, that's great. Great example.
Yeah.
That's sort of what I am wondering, you know, when you're saying this. And so in one direction, we're moving towards electronical forms of identification or verification. And on the other hand, it's that much easier to fake those.
So easy. I mean, I'm old enough to remember like seeing fake documents from fraudsters and money launderers, which were like done on a homemade typewriter, you know, with now, of course, you can print something off the internet and you can amend it to put in your own details, your own personal payments or whatever, and it looks perfect. You know, that's
I think one classic instance from the recent times was obviously, you know, when you have some masks that have sort of, you know, some sort of certificate, but you don't really know if the certificate is valid. And you had some deficient masks entering the Czech market, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I mean, if your members haven't read this FATF report, it's an interesting one. It talks about how criminals are targeting also government support, which I'm sure there'll be government support in the Czech Republic, all through the EU there is. And the criminals are targeting that through fraud and corruption. And then, of course, they're laundering the proceeds from that. So, again, this will be no news to your viewers, I'm sure, but the amount of fraud and money laundering linked to COVID scams is huge around the world. One of the things, I don't know if you have any bankers in your members, but the banks I've been talking to and any payment companies are seeing, they're particularly looking very closely for unusual patterns of payments through what I would call like locked down sectors. Again, I don't know what the position is in the Czech Republic. I mean, how much of you guys have been locked down?
So it changes quite often, but I think as of right now, for example, all the shops except for the biggest grocery shops have to be closed. I think industry production is still pretty much ongoing, but there's definitely the services sector has been closed down for almost 4 weeks now. Yeah.
So, and I know in the Czech Republic, you guys like your beer. It's famous, isn't it? But but it's looking at pubs, restaurants, bars, nightclubs, sectors that you would expect are probably much quieter at the moment, and seeing if they've got strange patterns of flows. And certainly in quite a lot of European jurisdictions, they've seen strange patterns of large amounts of cash and money going through when there's no justification, and we think it's laundering. Interestingly, I heard a couple of firms say that they've seen intermingling. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, like mixing up the proceeds or commingling from crime with fast food takeaway firms. Because at the moment, a lot of people are getting food delivered, and actually we think organised crime has been using that as a cover to launder a lot of money. And also what I would say, we've all been told to, and we all have been, I'm sure, looking and treating PEPs more carefully. But what we know with COVID is that really anyone who's a public official who's linked to the procurement of PPE or COVID health equipment is probably high risk at the moment for bribery and corruption. So again, the banks are certainly reviewing that again and saying, or anyone really should be saying, if we have a relationship with someone who's linked to the public sector in procurement, we should be really careful with them because they could bring us risks of money laundering or corruption. Again, money mules. I don't know if that phrase will translate to your members, Jan.
I think it could, yeah.
Yeah. So again, some of you may have had this yourself. I don't know, but you may get an unsolicited email saying earn money, work at home, as a financial controller, and in return you get offered to keep a commission, and it could be money is routed through your account by money launderers and organised crime. Again, I've seen this a lot now. There's been a real upsurge of this, people being targeted on social media by organised criminals because they know that they've lost their job or that the economy is tough. And it's getting younger and younger now. So I was in Ireland, in Dublin, just before the lockdown, and I heard the head of their FIU talking about this, that they'd had to go into local Irish secondary schools and arrest 16 and 17-year-olds because they had been laundering money through money mule schemes. So, and even I've heard stories of even younger children than that being targeted. So that's a bit of a worry as well. And I guess finally, just, a lot more reports about large cash deposits and then payments being made overseas, claiming to be purchased for health equipment. But actually, we think that a lot of that is just covered for money laundering activity. So again, the advice that I've had from a couple of FIUs is if you see new companies that are buying or selling health equipment linked to COVID or other high demand products like that, that's a massive red flag and you should be very careful. And just like we've always said for money laundering, especially if a firm changes its business activity suddenly, so, they had nothing to do with the health industry and suddenly, oh, hello, they're exporting, whatever, or importing health equipment.
I think we've had cases like that, I think even on a national level here. There's been instances of companies being, as you said, set up exclusively or suddenly changing their business field. So those are very interesting. I have 2 more questions with regards to what you said. I think the PEP sort of discussion or topic is quite interesting because I don't know how it is in the UK, but even though there is some sort of general definition of, I just looked at it last week, who a PEP is, and there's like 3 different types. I wonder, is there sort of a centralized database of all the PEPs in there? Because I don't think there is one, right?
No, there isn't. There was a debate across the EU, wasn't there, a couple of years ago, whether the EU should have produced a central register of PEPs. And, you know, it's such an interesting issue, this, because when I train different firms, you know, all different firms have different, a lot of different firms have different definitions of how low they will take a PEP, because as I'm sure you know, the EU definition says it's got to be someone in a prominent public official role.
Yeah.
Now, but of course, if you buy in a PEP commercial database from a software, you know, provider, or sorry, an information vendor, you know, they sometimes will go very low level. You know, they might go to a regional small town's mayor, whereas maybe arguably that person isn't senior. And then of course, you've got the whole tricky issue of RCAs, relatives and close associates, which, you know, we train on one of our programs about a famous case involving a PEP. He was a Nigerian guy, James Ibori, and he came to the UK from Nigeria, did some fraud, left the UK once he got kicked out, went back to Nigeria and became the state governor of the Niger Delta region of Nigeria. And then he laundered like $250 million through Dubai and the UK. And eventually he got arrested, but he went to prison with his wife and his mistress and his lawyer. And the judge in that case was arguing that the banks should have classed his mistress as a relative or close associate. So they should have done, you know, enhanced due diligence on her. But, you know, a lot of banks wouldn't treat a mistress, if you like, as a PEP by association. So it gets really grey. And you know what I would say? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if someone meets the technical legal definition of a PEP. If they pose a higher risk to your firm, you should do enhanced due diligence on them to protect yourself. And in the current climate, I would suggest, you know, that probably means almost taking it down a level, certainly thinking that anyone's included with, as a public official working on public health, I would be very nervous about them. So a lot of firms have a separate category. It might not be like PEP, but it might be kind of, you know, public official. I've seen that term used in quite a lot of firms where they know the person isn't maybe senior enough to be a PEP, but they're kind of saying there's still some extra risks here, and we maybe want to keep an eye on them a bit more closely. But look, it's all about risk-based approach. And you can make another argument, which is, you know, if you look at one of the big commercial databases from like WorldCheck, one of these big international companies, you know, how many people are listed on that register of PEPs and their relatives and close associates? It must be hundreds of thousands. And we're still not stopping the cases of grand corruption, are we? And in fact, as you know from the work you've done, you know, your career, you know, in fact, it's probably getting worse, isn't it? You know, the amount of money going out of countries through corrupt government officials, it's probably getting worse. So I think there is more pressure to redefine PEPs, I think, and I think regulators struggle with it as well. I know I was talking to a colleague in the Middle East, and they are really like angry with the way that the local regulator treats PEPs. They go too low, and they say every minor government official should be a PEP. And I'm not sure that's the best answer either. So look, it's a really interesting, difficult area, but yeah, governments have been reluctant to come up with a register of PEPs. In the UK, they've been talking about doing something now where you will have some form of register, but I think it's still in the very early stages. I mean, have there been moves or any thoughts about that in the Czech Republic?
I think there's been an updated methodology of, you know, different types. I don't think it goes quite as low in the Czech Republic as in potentially some other countries, but there's a defined set of functions that are listed on there. But then, as you mentioned, the issue with relatives and associates is quite a difficult one. Yeah. And I do wonder if, you know, with respect to that, you even can have one centralized database, or whether the effort should be more maybe regionally dispersed, where I guess you would really have to put stress on the data quality and periodically try to relate a certain PEP with as many people as you can based on engagements in companies or other relations.
What I would say, yeah, and if you are using commercial like PEP databases, you should be aware that, and that, to be fair, the vendors even themselves admit this, in some jurisdictions they are not comprehensive. especially in a lot of African jurisdictions, and actually you need to have some more local knowledge and local understanding to really understand who the PEPs are. And it's really difficult. I mean, another example is cultural differences. So again, I train a Malaysian bank, and in Malaysia, a cousin is actually a really close family connection. So they treat a cousin as a relative under the PEP definition, even though under EU standards that's not caught. But they do it from a risk-based sort of approach, So it's a really complicated topic, isn't it?
Interesting,
Yeah. But yeah, look, we again, I would say, if you've never looked at some of the FATF guidance on PEPs, what makes one PEP riskier than another PEP, then at least that'd be a good place to start. And I would challenge you perhaps go back and have a look at your own PEP definitions in your firm and say, have we got those right based on what FATF are saying? Because I think we can always sort of reflect, have we actually got that definition, at the right level? Are we capturing the right sort of people? And if you don't have a sort of subcategory of like public officials, maybe think about that as well.
Have you sort of, I guess one thing that's closely tied to this is, have you seen a big spike in adoption of new, let's say, technological tools that can help companies manage this? Or
yeah, no, massively. And certainly in the CDD world, I work a lot with commercial banking operators, and I don't know if you've ever been involved in that world, but if you're dealing with any sort of corporate entity trying to unwrap its ownership structure and understand its beneficial ownership, plus you're trying to understand the nature of its business, maybe you're trying to understand what the negative news media says about that entity, maybe you're trying to understand the source of wealth behind the business and maybe the UBOs, maybe you're trying to understand its counterparties and its geographical footprint, so you can assess the sanctions risk. And to do all of that properly is a huge piece of work, and it's so expensive. Even if you're not a bank, if you have a counterparty, and you need to do due diligence from anti-bribery, corruption, or some other requirement, to supply chain audits, whatever compliance it is, that can be so time consuming. And a lot of, in a lot of jurisdictions, they're trying to look at what we call KYC utilities. I don't know if you've come across this. So in Scandinavia, the Nordic banks are working together on an initiative that is, the idea is that what they will do is this KYC utility, it will go to all the big corporates and it will do all the CDD, and it will hold it to a central standard, and it'll hold it in a repository. And then whenever a company needs to do due diligence on that instance, they have to redo it all again, they just come to the central utility. And obviously they pay a fee, but it's much more efficient. Do you see what I mean? And they're trying to get that model to work. And obviously to do that, it's a lot of logistics, because all the firms have to agree to a similar standard of CDD. And that's a challenge, And look, there's a lot of technology now to help with this. Again, a lot of software vendors out there. Big data is being used a lot now, so that instead of having to and this is for more like things like retail banking, like scraping pre-existing customer data so it pre-populates application forms, so that you don't have to ask a customer to fill in 10 pages online, all that sort of stuff, and of course at the back end as well, I'm sure, a lot of your members will be aware and be working with some of the new innovative tools around identifying suspicious activity, transaction monitoring and sanction screening, where we're using a lot more attempts to use artificial intelligence so that the systems learn from things that they should be learning from. And it's not just about, it's not even really true artificial intelligence, but it's about picking up things like, for example, if you're doing sanction screening on your customers and you're triggering alerts based on a name of a street. So I'm trying to remember the name of it, but I think there was a street in Sofia in Bulgaria, which is called Crimea Street. So these poor people that lived in Crimea Street, every time they tried to do a payment, the international banks were blocking it. But for a simple software solution that learns from that and says, well, actually, this word Crimea is in the field that's actually a street name, not a name of a country. Therefore, going forward, we should teach our system to disregard them. And it's just little things like that that systems are getting better on. So there's a lot of work going on at the back end as well. And again, if you wanted to do a session with your members on some of that new technology at some point, we could definitely do something, because we talk to a lot of both people that use these new solutions and like in firms, but also a lot of these different software companies. And obviously, they're very keen to tell you about what their systems do. But yeah, it's moving really quickly.
Do these make sort of way into the courses themselves? I mean, when somebody's doing a course, do you sort of put stress on, well, you should also be a sort of technologically able, or you should set
massively
skills as well?
Massively. I mean, we have a whole new certificate looking at the developments in regulatory technology and fintech as well. So we have a whole qualification on that, but it's also in all of our qualifications, because you can't work in compliance now without understanding how technology is changing and how it's already changed, where it's going. So I mean, the next big thing is quantum computing, apparently, and quantum computing is going to change. If you believe the technical experts, it's going to make what we're doing now like we were in the Stone Age, and that won't be far away, people are saying, So, and of course, you all know about distributed ledger technology and the way that that's got potential for financial services and other industries. It's already being used in trade finance. So it's moving so quickly. Yeah, so it's definitely part of what we do in all of our qualifications. Understanding new regulatory technology and also new new regulator technology and reporting technology. So we had a session in Singapore a month ago where we heard from the local monetary authority about how now all their reporting is going to be done automatically with firms when it comes to regulation. So they'll be scraping data off the firm's own systems, and it's all going very high tech. And that's the way regulators are moving as well. So rather than having to do a compliance report once a year or whatever, every quarter to your regulator, it's all going, automated, isn't it? So it's affecting everything to do with compliance, from regulatory reporting to CDD to suspicious activity, so it's moving so quickly. It's hard to keep up. And but yeah, definitely a massive part of what we do.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the technology is moving faster than the humans almost. Because one thing that seems to me like is, I guess, here to stay for the long term is the communication side of it. And I wonder, because we periodically always arrive at this issue of maybe how do you guys try to communicate or educate in the sense of the tone at the top principle, or how these values that are set in a company are reflected in the day-to-day functioning.
Yeah, well, we do a lot with that. We train a lot of board level, senior level people, but we also train a lot of compliance people about how to have those communications with their business. And I think, again, it's not about threatening the business with fines. It's about showing the business the value of what they do. But you're absolutely right that I know it's a cliche, but that tone from the top is so important. So, it is getting that senior management visibility to publicly endorse the concept of compliance, but not just say the words, Jan. It's about actually backing it up with decision making so that they make it clear that they support the compliance function, and they, in terms of the governance structures and the resourcing and the committee structures, that, they've got the right senior people in there, and also maybe signing off on, the corporate ethics statements, the corporate vision, the decision-making sort of filters that I mentioned before, and things like how people get remunerated. So, and even little things like endorsing the compliance training, being really visibly saying, look, whoever, I'm the chief executive, I'm the global head of operations, whatever, and I am taking ownership of this risk and this training. And I would say the biggest trend with compliance is that the compliance department doesn't own compliance. They are the advisor and the support. The business owns the risks around compliance. And that's where you've got to move to, so that, you know, onboarding clients is an operational issue. And the business, when they onboard clients, they should assess and own the risk. The compliance function should be there to help them understand the risk. But at the end of the day, the business should own the risk. And so that needs to be driven right from the top of the business, doesn't it? You know, that way of thinking. Yeah. And that's been a really interesting change. And I won't name the bank, but I work with one global bank in particular, and their head of commercial banking, he personally attended all of the pilot sessions for our financial crime training that we delivered. And he did that. He flew all around the world and did that. And he was sending a message, and he was a business guy, a sales guy at the end of the day. Now that guy is now he is now the chief executive of this global bank. And he's a massive compliance advocate, but he's very much from a business perspective, you know. So, and if you've got someone like that on your side, the business will work with you as a compliance officer, you know.
Yeah, it sounds like a good way to set things up. I still feel like, with respect to what you have said, I still feel like the notion is that compliance is sort of responsible for everything, when I guess it really should not be. Yeah, that's an interesting talking point.
Well, one of the ways on a practical level that a lot of firms are looked at is, I don't know if you're familiar with the term RACI, R-A-C-I.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is kind of like trying to map out clearly who's accountable and who's responsible for what across your business. And then obviously it's about getting the governance around it, so it's not ambiguous, you know, as to who's responsible for, you know, onboarding clients and assessing the risk, you know what I mean? And that's quite a big cultural change to get it in black and white, to say, yep, the business owns the risks here. And, you know, it depends. I mean, some of your members will be, you know, I'm sure winning that battle. Others might be finding it harder.
I think it always depends also on, you know, either the human resources or the financial resources. A lot of the companies we have been talking to, you know, if it's just one compliance officer, obviously that's a harder job to do.
I think it's also the sector. So like a lot of, you know, new startup fintech companies, a lot of the senior managers, you know, and this is not a criticism, they're very like IT focused, they're very entrepreneurial, and they don't necessarily have that sort of compliance on the radar. Whereas if you've been in senior management in banking, for example, they have seen what's happened to banks when things have gone wrong, and they kind of, maybe it's a little bit more culturally hardwired into them. Don't know. And you can't generalize, but I think that's also a challenge.
But that does sound interesting. I do wonder, you know, whether there's a easily sort of noticeable difference between the old financial institutions like classical banks and then the new fintech startups that maybe do not realize how important the regulation is or why it should be addressed.
Yeah, it's definitely noticeable. I think there is. And having said that, you know, I've seen a couple of fintechs I've been working with, and they're really 100% on board with compliance, and they want to actually position themselves as, you know, a really compliant, good fintech, you know what I mean? So, because they don't want to be seen as being a bit sort of on the edge, you know what I mean, by their customers or regulators. So yeah, I get that's all part of, you know, if you're a compliance officer in a fintech company, you know, you need to be in there with your senior management explaining, actually, guys, compliance could be a real asset for us if we position ourselves in the market with our consumers and our regulators and our counterparties as being actually, you know, we take compliance very seriously and we're ethical. Actually, that's going to bring big benefits, you know, for sure. And it's about, it comes back to like sustainability as well, doesn't it? You know, all that sort of model about sustainable business.
Yeah. I feel like there's one more thing I should probably ask, just because I find it really interesting. I wonder, how do you think, if there is going to be change at all, I don't really know, but do you think there's going to be some noticeable change with respect to compliance after the UK formally leaves the EU, or what's been the situation there also?
Yeah. I think, no, there definitely will be. So at the moment, obviously the EU has followed for example, the EU money laundering directives to date, pretty much, with maybe one or two slight variants. But we're not alone in the EU under that, So I think once we leave, you're probably going to see a slight divergence on anti-money laundering standards, but I think it's going to be minimal. I think mainly because most of the UK banks are very international, and they want to maintain their EU sort of standards, if you like, for ease of cross-border. But I think the biggest change with compliance is going to come in the sanctions space. And I think the UK is going to probably move away and become much more a sort of list-focused, activity-targeted regime, much more like the American OFAC list. I think as well, most commentators are saying that the EU will probably soften its position on Russia and Russian sanctions, because the UK historically has been probably the most vocal in pushing within the EU for stronger sanctions on Russia. So the view from most commentators, but look, who knows, is that the EU will probably maybe sort of slightly move away from sanctions on Russia, and maybe the UK will perhaps continue to put more pressure on. But look, that's one of the exciting, interesting, worrying, challenging things about sanctions. No one really knows, because it's all tied up with geopolitics, isn't it? And of course, we've just had probably going to have a new president in the US, and he has already been talking about having warmer relationships with Iran. And it's still not clear what his view is on Russia. So, and then of course, you've got all the other challenges around the world with Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, North Korea, but yeah, I think the big one for me is probably going to be sanctions is going to be the biggest change. I think the rest of sort of general compliance, I think most UK firms will broadly stay in line with EU standards, would be my view.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and finally, I'm sorry we're leaving you, by the way. It makes me sad. I don't want to be political about this, but it was a very close vote. So
yeah, I mean,
it's going to make life harder for UK people as well to travel, which is annoying. So
yeah, I understand. Yeah, I mean, I'm young, so I still have some hope that maybe, who knows, in time, you guys might be willing to rejoin us, or we'll see.
Yeah, here's hoping. Here's hoping, but there we are.
But do you think, I feel like, as far just because you mentioned AMLD, I do wonder, are you guys still gonna, because I think there's a goal to unify all the UBO databases into one in the end.
Yeah, that's a big question. So at the moment, our UBO register is called the Persons of Significant Control Register. Yeah. And the UK government's just agreed to do a big investigation and review of how our company's house, which is our company's registration, works. Because as you know, there's been a huge criticism of the amount of laundering that's gone on through shell companies in the UK, nominee directors and all of that. So yeah, we've committed as a country to strengthen our registers and our systems. And I'm hopeful that we'll continue to kind of work with the EU to get consistent standards. But will we fully implement the 6 MLD? Probably not. And the big sticking point for the UK has been trusts. And that's because the UK trust industry has been sort of quite reluctant to commit to formal registries of publicly available trusts, and there's been a lot of tensions there. But so again, that's really question mark, and I think we just have to wait and see, Jan, on what commitment you get from the government in the UK to that. They have committed to do a review into our company's registration, so I think we'll just have to wait and see what the government in the UK says.
Yeah, and do you think in general there is some sort of noticeable push towards more transparency and
I think on paper there is, but if you watch, we work with the dark money files. I don't know if you come across them on the internet, and you look at what happened with Danske, and you look at what happened with these front companies. It's so blatant and it's so depressingly huge that there is a commitment at a high level from politicians to be seen to be doing something. I think that's pretty clear. At a practical level, is it actually having any positive benefit? Not convinced it is at the moment. And certainly, you know, banks, when they use the registers, they don't rely on them. You know, so, and if you're a criminal and you want to use a nominee and lie about the real UBO of your company, is that register going to stop you? And of course, there are still many jurisdictions that don't really care. So, you know, I think we've still got a long way to go. It's probably like squeezing a balloon. You know, we're kind of forcing the problem to a different part of the of industry in the world. So I don't know, I haven't really answered your question. I think there are some efforts being made, and there has been some progress. I think the pressure on the banks in particular is very real, and their standard of doing proper due diligence to understand ownership structures has definitely improved. And they are now looking beyond just formal ownership structures. So and they should, the law says they should, but they are actually starting to do it a lot more. At least the good banks are. You know, they're starting to say who really pulls the strings of the puppet behind this company. Mm. And if they see a nominee, for example, they are trying to get behind that nominee. But we're still got a long way to go. You know, as I'm sure the guy from Transparency International probably said when he or she was speaking with you.
It's the same here, I think, pretty much. But yeah, at least it seems like things are going in the right way, in the right direction. I mean, so
listen, it can't be a bad thing that these registers are being rolled out across the EU. So it sounds like you now have one in the Czech Republic. Do you?
Yeah, I think it's right now the draft or the law draft proposal is being approved. Right now it goes to the Senate, so we still don't have the public version of the register. The register is already set up, but it's locked only for certain actors with access. But I guess maybe to sort of generally wrap up the interview, I have one more kind of question regarding the ICA community, because you mentioned that in the beginning, and I definitely feel like it's great when you guys try to bring people together and share knowledge and best practice. So I sort of wonder, you know, where we might say that we see some development coming from the institutions, but we don't really know how fast or how effective these will be. I wonder if we can maybe place a little more trust in the community itself, you know, where if people believe in doing something the right way and they sharing these stories or experiences, or what's sort of your experience with engaging within the community?
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. I think we all have a responsibility as compliance professionals to kind of help raise standards both in our own countries and around the world. So, and you know, we're in a very good position to do that. You know, if you work for an electronics company, a pharmaceutical company, or a bank, you know, so yeah, I think that's why I think, you know, what you're doing, Ian, with the Compliance Academy, what the ICA is doing is great to work together, because what we're saying is let's try and get together and share best practice more with each other. So one of the things I'm doing at the moment is setting up some best practice forums all around the world. Again, I'd be happy to talk with you about whether there's appetite to do that in the Czech Republic, where we get together compliance professionals and we start sharing, you know, and asking questions of each other. You know, how do you deal with PEPs? What's your view on how to manage sanctions risk, or how should we? What's the best way to get our senior managers to take compliance seriously? You know, and what I find is that compliance professionals are usually really willing to share with each other and support each other. And at the ICA, we're very keen to help facilitate that. Not only that, but we can shout loudly to governments. So you might be aware the FATF have been pushing out the concept of a lot more collaboration between the private and public sector. And we were lucky enough to have the head of FATF at our conference a couple of weeks ago. And he was saying that he's really keen on this public private partnership. So again, I would encourage all of you to get involved by, you know, pushing your government, your regulators, your law enforcement to set up more bodies to share across public and private. So like in the UK, I don't know if you have a version of this in Czech Republic, we have something called the Joint Money Laundering Intelligence Task Force, JMLIT, and that basically meets once a week, and it's a group of like regulators, firms, and law enforcement, and they share specific intelligence and information. And the lawyers have agreed it's okay to do it, and it works really well. And that model is being promoted all around the world now. You're seeing it in lots of countries. So So yeah, I think to answer your question, if your members are interested in getting involved in that, speak to Jan, and Jan is going to be working with us, I think, over the next few years, hopefully to help have best practice sharing forums where we can share with each other the challenges and the approaches we're taking. And the ICA is really lucky because we see internationally what all the different sectors and countries and regulators are doing. And we're more than happy to share that with you guys as well. So yeah, get involved with the ICA, get involved with the Compliance Academy would be my answer.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. We are obviously very grateful to be able to talk to you guys because you bring so much sort of international perspective and inspiration to what we are doing. So I would like to thank you for attending today, for speaking to me for close to 1 hour, I think. It's been really engaging. I would love for us maybe to repeat this sometime, maybe on a couple different topics. But
yeah,
again,
very happy to.
I feel like I'm leaving with more questions than how many I've had in the beginning. So thanks again. And to all our viewers, today, this was the 10th episode of CA Talk, today with Mr. Pekka Dare. So Pekka, thank you again.
Pleasure, Jan, absolute pleasure. And I hope your viewers found that useful.
Yeah, I think definitely. And I'll be looking forward to both working with ICA again in general and talking to you again soon.
Lovely.
All
Take
right.
care.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you. You too.